good? Going live. Okay, get that video URL. Do the thing on the FaceTime. Moving slow today. I think I say that every stream, every time I stream, or really anytime I talk to anybody, I talk about how tired I am and shit. Let's do create post. This is gonna be a good day, or it's gonna be a good stream. This is like a pretty fucking. I like the topic. So a couple things before I start. I watched the last two streams, of course, and I know the audio quality has been pretty fucking shitty. So going forward, and let me make sure the sound is even. Yeah. I mean, you could even hear it now. So maybe I'll lower my volume a little bit more because I'm like pretty fucking loud today. So we got a new microphone coming, should be here today. So by next week we'll have much better audio in general. And I'm still working on the technical shit for this. Like, even right now, the video is of me, but there's also like my desktop PC. They're using OBS and shit, but I don't care. Those are problems we could figure out. And we are on episode number 3. This will be the first full week, so I hit my stream goal. We hit we hit the goal of following the schedule and doing 3, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 to 9, assuming that like nothing weird happens now. Pretty much got that done, which is fucking dope. Really cool. I really like how the last 2 conversations came out, and I'm really like hype about this altogether in general. I think that, yeah, we definitely need a better microphone. That's a big takeaway. And then I know my internet connection looked a little shoddy last time, and the video cuts out pretty frequently. But we'll see how this goes. I think I know why that happened last time, but it might be happening right now. And if that continues to be a thing, I think we'll start looking into solutions. I know what the issue is. It's just shitty. My connection is shitty. Like with my to my ISP through my modem and shit. That's shitty, but also the like Wi-Fi component that I'm using to connect to my router through my desktop is pretty shitty too, and I think that's the core issue. But anyway, I'm really excited about this topic. This is something that I've been thinking about for a long time. Talking about your first day as software engineer, which means I'll be talking about my first day as a software engineer. I want to make this video for a few reasons. Firstly, I haven't really seen anyone post a video on YouTube about their first day as a software engineer that accurately reflected what my first day was like. Like I saw something similar where somebody was talking about like what to expect, what kind of work would you do as a junior engineer, and what he was saying did not reflect at all what my experience was. And I do feel like in the YouTube world, there's a lot of people who are kind of faking it, and like either, I don't know. I think that either they're lying to some extent, or maybe also their first job was like a non-traditional job. So I'll be talking about more about like you're starting your first day at a like actual company that has a real software team, not like you're just like working for your uncle building his site for like whatever. Or doing freelance stuff. This is like you learned how to code, you got a job, you did job interviews, and you're starting like big office on Monday and like what to expect. So for me, my first job was at a big, huge company, Fortune 500 insurance company. I got my breakfast burrito going on. I'm definitely like scattered today. I just like woke up and threw this shit on. I already have the chat up. Let's make sure I do have chat up. I don't think probably nobody's gonna join, but you never know. You want to be on top of it just in case. So let me get that up. Okay. Keep eating my burrito. But yeah, definitely like No, I still hear distortion in my voice when I get like when I hit the bigger volume. Well, fuck it. Monday the audio will be really good. So my first job, Fortune 500 company, massive, massive insurance company in Des Moines, Iowa, and I've been coding for about 5 months. I was so fucking hyping into it, couldn't wait to start my first day. The interview process was pretty standard, I think. Actually, I mean, I'm definitely gonna talk about interviewing at some point because I feel like either I'm really good at it or people just suck at it. I've interviewed for, I think now, five tech jobs ever, and 4 of them gave me offers. The only one that didn't was my very first interview ever. And then since then, every time I interview, I get a job offer. So definitely want to talk about that one day because apparently Shaboy's got some game. I mean, we all knew that already though. But the interview process was pretty standard, I think. There's a contractor, so through a contracting company. So they have like their own self-assessment, or they have assessments that you do. It's like standardized, testy, multiple choice kind of questions. Actually, this is kind of interesting. I'll talk a little bit about how I got this job because I think it's a good story. So to get my first job, you have no experience. It's kind of hard to get your foot in the door in tech. That's like the one caveat of all this. It can take a minute to get your foot in the door. So I applied to about 200 or 300 places, and one of them was this contracting company that was hiring for Principal Financial Group is the name of the company I used to work for. And they had like this assessment where it's like multiple choice question about HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And I did it on live stream. I don't think of a stream as recorded. I don't think it exists anymore. But I took the test on my live stream, and I'm recording myself doing it. Or maybe they record me, and I get the recording. I can't remember. I think they also did record. Like they made you turn your webcam on and share your screen while you're taking the test, so they know you're not cheating. Because I guess I talked to the company after, like months later after I was hired, and they told me that they get like a fuckload of like. This is gonna sound racist, but Indians in particular, Indian people who are like core, like cornerstone of the IT industry, and like, man, this is definitely delicate territory, but their position was that they have a number of Indian applicants who end up being fraudulent on either their resume or some aspect of the application process. So because of that, and probably like other races too, not just Indian people or people from elsewhere, but they have a system of like monitoring you while you take these tests. So I take the tests and I'm going through them, and the questions are so fucking stupid. And at the end of the test, I get the results back for it, and I messaged the recruiter who had like linked me to the test, and I told him this test sucked. Not quite like in that language, but I did tell him like this isn't testing anything that's relevant to the industry, which is pretty ballsy to do as somebody who's never even actually worked in a day in software to say that your test is shitty. But I did it, and because of that, he responded. The first thing he asked is to like if I could work on the questions and like help him. That they would pay me to come up with like a better test, and then he also sent my application through to principal. So after that happens, principal contacts me. They interview me, and they asked 5 or 6 JavaScript basic questions. The questions were really, really fucking easy. They were. I think it was like reverse array, reverse. I mean, exactly the typical shit you would hear if you like Google searched what a JavaScript interview would look like for a junior position. There's like a there was a sorting problem that you had to do, just shit like that. I think at the end there was also like actual, outside of just JavaScript, there was some like actual web development type stuff. And yeah, so I went through that, got the job, no problem. Missed one of the questions, the sorting question I missed, but other than that, pretty much everything else was pretty easy. got the job. Job is in Iowa. I'm in New Jersey, so I moved to Iowa on like a Saturday, and I'm starting work on Monday. And I remember going in on Monday, and this is like 3 years ago, pre-COVID time. So, and as a contractor, I couldn't work from home, so I had to actually go into an office, which is bullshit. Refuse to do that anymore, and like wear khaki pants and like button-down shirt. I mean, you look like an office stiff. I look like a dude from Workaholics, like the TV show, where I'm like looking like this, but have like a button-down shirt that's all like wrinkled and shit with like a little ID, give you like the ID badge and stuff. So I get in, and yeah, if you work for a big company, like your first day is gonna be like you're not gonna write code. You're probably not gonna do anything. Probably not gonna do anything cool. You're just gonna get set up with a bunch of shit. You're gonna they'll give you your laptop. If you work for a big company, like a big corporate company where you're going to the office, your first thing is going to be like visiting security to get an ID badge or some dumb shit like that. At some point, you'll probably meet your team that you're working with if you're working on a team, which you almost certainly will be. And someone will you'll get a laptop, and someone will sit down and go through what companies call an onboarding process. And this isn't just if you're an engineer. I think if you're like anything within this world, you probably have to get like onboarded with your PC. And it sucks. It's just like running, especially when you don't know anything. Like you're just running random ass bash scripts that people are telling you to run. Shit's going wrong. Like the person who's helping you is like, oh, this has never happened before. So they'll have to like ask the other dude who's like, oh, you have to call this person. If you work in a big company, you find there's chains of dependencies all over the place. So if you need something done, you have to I have so many stories about at Principal specifically, because it was such a mammoth-sized company, of needing some weird specific thing from some weird specific team, and you're spending weeks in trying to track down someone that or just getting rerouted constantly. I remember for a project I was working on, I had to get an SSL cert for to deploy something to through Azure, so through Microsoft Azure. We had to do some DNS registration and stuff and some CNAME type shit. And I'm a front end dev. I'm a front end developer. It's way outside. It's like a different thing. And trying to find out who in the company could get me an SSL cert for this thing, or could fucking pay for it. You have to pay for. You have to go to a DigiCert or something like that to get an SSL, to get a cert. You have to pay for it. So you have to get clearance and weeks. I think it took me maybe a month or 2 months before I could get the cert, just because you'd have to file a fucking ticket through some antiquated ass system for some team that you don't know these people. So you're in your message hey, my name is Dave, I'm a blah blah blah, just wondering, blah 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 blah. Wait, it took a month or two. But when you're doing this onboarding stuff, I feel like shit always will go wrong. It's a guarantee. Something's gonna fucking happen, and the person who's helping you who's helping you onboard is gonna have to call someone else or say I don't know. Every company I've worked for, my onboarding process, there's been issues, and I think every time I've seen someone go through onboarding, there's issues. I don't know why. It's just a given. But okay. So again, I remember I meet my team, just a group of boys, a group of dudes, 25, 30-ish years old. We go for a walk around the campus, or give me little tour, and sometime we had there's the week. It was Monday. Weekly staff meetings were Monday morning, so we went to the staff meeting. I'll never forget this. I remember being in the first staff meeting in this conference room with, 15, 20 other front-end devs. I mentioned this last stream, but I'm going to rehash anyway. 15 and 20 other devs, and they're going through their agenda and shit. I didn't know what the fuck anyone was saying. And there's a certain terminology, there's certain words, and there's a way of talking in software that boot camps aren't really gonna. A boot camp is gonna be the closest thing to prepare for you, because it's about the community and about people. If you're sitting at home self-taught, unless I missed something somewhere. Like, there's no way you go in and have any idea what the fuck people are talking about. There's just like a like even but like I was gonna write. I really should have done this. I was gonna write down a list of like random ass terms that get thrown out in tech for all kinds of shit. Um, like even the term onboarding gets used in a lot of different ways, and that's something that seems unique to tech. Like I've never used the word onboarding in my life prior to that. Documentation, that's like I don't know, but there's like certain buzzwords and shit that people will like use, and there's ways of talking that people engage in that like when you first start out, it like I just remember like I remember sitting in the meeting and they're talking about like the program layer is fucking up, like the program management team just can't get their shit together, and because of that it's like I was trickling down to like the rest of the company, and like the data layers getting all fucked up, and like the API team. I don't know. There's just like I'm sitting there listening to them talk about this stuff, and I'm like, what the fuck is program management? Like, what does that even mean? And the same goes for like Scrum and Agile. Like, yeah, you could read like the Agile manifesto, but until you're actually like developing software in it, you have no idea what's going on. Jira is a whole fucking thing. Like whatever company you work at is gonna have some ticketing system or some like organizational system for creating processes to actually write software. So you're not just like, it's not like you just go in and someone says build a website, and then you're like, okay, cool, and you just go and build a website. It doesn't work like that. Every company I've worked for, and probably the vast majority of software companies, are going to be following some sort of agile type situation, or what they think is agile, which is a conversation for a different day. But basically, you'll get your work planned out in 2-week sprints, and like there's planning sessions. There's what they call retros, so which is really common practice. Every sprint, you sit with your team, and you talk about like. And you bitch about other people. That's pretty much what it is. You sit there and you talk about how this other team is like fucking everything up for you, or some dumb shit like that. Or you just talk about like how good everything is going, even if it's not. That's really common too. Where you sit there and say, yeah, we got a lot of work done, good collaboration all around. No real issues. I think we got a lot done, and there's a couple hiccups there, blah blah blah. That's really common too. It's pretty rare for a retro to result in like positive action from what I've seen. But anyway, it's just one of these other like scrummy agile kind of things, and that like Scrum Agile world is like kind of where this all begins to some extent, or at least it did for me. I didn't know, like it's very confusing, and how like tickets work, and how like this. So in Jira you have like they call it a board, so you have like this. I wish I should have like let's see if I can just like Google a picture real quick, get that going. And yeah, even my company now doesn't use Jira, we use GitLab, but it's the same fucking thing. Here we go. Here's a good board right here. Okay, let me get my face out. Okay, so I want to. Okay, so this is like this is kind of smaller and more simple than most Jira boards, but this is the basic premise where you'll have like tickets in this to-do column here, and as you're working through, the general idea is you like pick one off the top. Supposedly this is supposed to be prioritized, but really fuck all, that never happens. I've never been somewhere where they have like a good prioritized backlog. Never really seen it. Last job was close, but not really, but kind of. But you take a ticket, move it to, you assign it to yourself, you move it to in progress, and this way this like creates visibility for your team for what you're working on. And you usually have on your team, you'll have like a scrum manager, or like some sort of, like I said before, program management type thing. You'll have someone called a product owner, or they might have different titles for it. Principal, they call them business analysts, I think, but they were kind of like stakeholder-y sort of things. And these are the people who are like, know what you're trying to build from a business perspective, and they're creating like these tickets, they're creating these tasks, and they're creating these projects for like the engineers to carry out and execute. That's like the core of how like software stuff works, or software process works. And the idea is that this shit will get planned out in 2 week sprints. They call them sprints every 2 weeks. Like, I didn't expect this to be all about Scrum and Agile, but that's the direction it's going. I'm fine with that. But you'll like during a previous sprint, you'll go through something called planning, where you'll look at the tickets, the work that's coming up, and like your team will start splitting them out. Usually, like the Scrum Master, product owners will. Those are the people who sort of have oversight into what the whole company is doing too. As an engineer, especially as like a junior or lower level engineer, you're rarely going to like peek beyond your team's work. It's just not relevant to you, and it's not what you're supposed to be doing. So that's why there's you have like that's what a Scrum Master or a like program management type. Those people are supposed to be keeping track of work from like a top-down perspective. So they'll help like plan out. They know the business needs better. They're in contact. Like if you work for my company's an insurance company right now, so those are the people who are in contact with like the underwriters or the insurance agents and shit, and know what they need, and then they can translate what they need into like an idea or like a task or an app or whatever, and then you sit down with the developers and developers kind of decide how to break out the work from a technical perspective. But yeah, I remember, I'll never forget that first meeting. It was like imposter syndrome out the ass, and it is in fucking escapable. I don't see how somebody could like, depending on the job in the office to some extent. I knew JavaScript. I was very confident as a programmer, even before I started. But there's like this other element to it, and it's almost like more important. I remember one of the lead engineers I worked with. She was very smart. I don't think she was a great developer, but she was so good at the other stuff. She was really good at like getting down to like, let's not do unnecessary work. What problem are we actually trying to solve? Why are we spending time doing this when we already have like this thing that does that anyway? Or like I remember last time we tried to do this and it didn't work. Or she was always bringing up shit like that, and that stuff is huge for a company. I think like as a software engineer, like if you can like prove that some work coming down the pipe is bullshit and doesn't actually need to be done, you just did a ton of work. Like that, you provide a fuckload of value by saving the company from like going down this path and spending resources on some dumb shit. But without writing getting code, you could be very effective. But first day, you'll probably be nervous. I don't see how you're not. You'll feel like an imposter for sure. You'll be even your first like 6 months probably you'll be very deferral, like, and that's all great. Company hired you. They know what you are. Like, you're not fooling anybody for the most part. Like, you might feel like you're going to get fired all the time. I remember my second job, I felt like for the first 6 months I was going to get fired all the time. Looking back now, that's not even close. Like, not even true at all. And that might be a management failing to some extent, I think, if an employee is feeling like that. But first day, you're gonna feel dumb. Yeah, you'll probably be in a meeting like the one that I was in, where people are talking about like even stuff like QA. Like I didn't know what QA was before I started software industry stuff. Like I know what it is from an assembly line perspective, but I didn't realize how like. So usually, like looking at this fake Jira board right now, most teams or anyone that I've been on, maybe except my last job, which was kind of a unicorn job, usually you'll have like a column. I think they call it these are columns, not swim lanes. I don't know. There's all this fucking technical jargon for Jira. Not only that, there's like a query language, like a data query language specifically for Jira called JQL. Like there's a it's a SQL-like language for finding like tickets by passing in like a query string or like a set of query parameters and shit. Like Jira is deep. It's really deep. You get these story points too. And we'll talk about story points in a second. It's my favorite topic of all time. But um, usually for QA, usually most traditional software teams are going to have between in progress and done, there's going to be a bunch of other columns. So when something's in progress, like you're writing code for it, and then when you're done, it'll go into code review. And usually there's a column for code review depending on the company, but almost every company is going to do code review. That's one we should definitely talk about because the politics of code review are it's such a fun topic, and it's something that's unavoidable in software. So that's another one. Like, I didn't know what code review meant going into the job. I knew code review was a thing, but I thought code review was like at the end of the week, everyone sits down in a room and we look at code on like a projector. Like old school, like in high school, where they just like you look at a projector and everyone sits down and goes, "Yeah, I don't like that. I don't think that semicolon is. I don't think that's in the right spot there." And I thought that's how it went. Not really true. People just review shit on their own. So I didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't really open a pull request prior to this. I didn't understand what the purpose was when I was like pre my first job. So getting understanding of like this weird code review process. So after you finish like writing your little ticket, let's say your ticket is. Let me move my head real quick. Over here, like why did I just zoom in? No. Oh, I zoomed out. Okay, there we go. Fuck, I forgot what I was talking about. So let's say your ticket is like design a new rocket, right? So there will be like your product owner will be like, hey, we need to design a new rocket. I'm gonna make a ticket. So they make the ticket. You talk about it in planning, and then the next sprint, the ticket gets assigned to you, and now you're designing the rocket. So you take this, you assign yourself to it. You're a little Santa man here. That's you. Click and drag it over to in progress, and now everyone knows you're working on it. When you go to, we'll talk about stand-up in a second. When you go to stand-up, which is like your daily status meeting, you'll say, hey, I'm working on TIS 17. Bang, bang, bang. I'm designing a new rocket. Should be done in a couple days. If I have any issues, I'll bring them up. But pretty confident I'll be able to get it done pretty quickly. Slide that over to in progress. Start cooking on it. And then let's say you finish that day or whatever, next day or whatever. Usually between in progress, there's a code review column, so you slide to code review, and you open your pull request for your code. And that's when all the developers who are significantly better than you are going to go in and be really mean about everything you did. I remember getting brutalized in my first pull request at my first job. Destroyed, like massacred. There was also some politics involved in the code review stuff that I didn't really see at the time. But like I would have pull requests with 50, 60 comments on them, which is not a good look for you. And at the time, I remember being like butthurt about it. And getting, I guess just because you're new, like everything is you're so sensitive to everything because it's like your first time doing it. So I remember like, I felt like if somebody left a comment on my pull request or if I did something wrong, it was a reflection on me. And I was very attuned to like, I wanted to work at this company full time after my, I wanted to like, I want to get more money and do all this shit. So I was like, I would panic so hard when I got like negative comments on my pull request. And like, I remember arguing with people on pull requests, but you're doing it over, they use Bitbucket, which is just another Git thing. So GitHub's like the primary one, very likely you'll be on GitHub, but could be on GitLab or Bitbucket as your source control manager. And so that's where like all your code lives. So when you go to work on something from a Git perspective, if you don't know anything about Git before you work, learn a little bit about Git. You don't have to know everything. I didn't know shit. I fucked up so much stuff with Git when I first started. I had merge conflicts with myself on like so many of my own pull requests. I didn't understand it at all. And that's one of those things that like no one's probably going to explain to you, or if they are, it's hard to understand. Like versioning and and Git and like source control management stuff, it's not like normal people just walking around just know this shit. And that's basically what I was at that point. I knew JavaScript a little bit. I knew how to build a website and shit, but that's like something else. And so I remember having all kinds of problems with Git. But the idea is you take, you when you're working on your hire a new rocket thing, you're gonna check out like the main repo. You'll check out like the master branch, the production branch, and you'll make your own branch off of that, and you make your changes, and then you go to merge your code into production or into like whatever the main branch. And that's when you'll see like Git diff kind of thing. One day we'll probably it'd be really cool to talk more about Git and like actually go through a pull request process and talk about code review and stuff more in depth. But that's the general idea. So stuff goes there into into code review, and then depending on the company, it'll get eventually it'll get approved and merged into this branch, or there's a QA process. The next step, whether that gets merged or not, is depending on the company. But the next step is when QA comes in, and QA are people who are usually not as technical as an engineer. They might know how to code a little bit if they're like automated testers, but if they're manual testers, which for front end is really common because you kind of have to like manually click and shit to like see if something's working. They're going to take your work, they're going to look at it, and they're going to measure it against the ticket, your design a new rocket ticket, and make sure that like the thing that you made is what it's supposed to be, didn't break anything else. So they're doing what's called regression testing, where now you don't just test the one thing, because in software, like everything's fucking like, it's like that thing where like you have leaky pipes everywhere, and if you like you fix the pipe in one area and then all of a sudden water starts gushing up in another area. So fucking common in software because everything's leaning on each other, like a lot of dependencies. So they have to they'll go back and regression test everything. If there's an issue, the QA person is going to come back and tell you about it, and then you have to fix it. And when I was a young man, even that I would take exception to. Like, and even now, there's times when you can, your relationship. One takeaway from this video, if you are a software engineer, is have a good relationship with your QA person. Like, that you need to have, you can't have a strained relationship with this person. If you're like combative, it's gonna make things so much harder for both of you. So you really want to work towards like collaborative relationship with your QA people. But they're gonna look at your stuff. If something's wrong, they're gonna come back and tell you. And at that point, you may have it's very, very common for a QA person to come back and say like, hey, this doesn't work, and you're looking at the requirements, and you're saying, oh, this is like, what you're talking about is sort of a different issue. We have to make like, now that's out of scope for this issue. So there's something called like, call it scope, or like, tickets are very specific. You're supposed to be working on this one thing. It's not like you should be working on this, like, while you're designing your new rocket, you shouldn't be like, oh, well, I can also just like get the Hubble working again real quick in the same pull request. Like, we could definitely like, it's just a one-line change. We could definitely do it. You don't want to do that, and the reason is because once you start doing this, like this, get Hubble working again with this, let's say this thing is good to go, you design the new rocket perfectly, but this one's fucked up. So now you're like slowing down your production. The idea with Agile is to deliver things very quickly in pieces, and if you can't get this merged because you lumped in this with it and this is fucked up, you're fucking up. So you want to like be very aware of your scope of the ticket and only like, I'm very, very I'm like, I might take this too far, where I am very reluctant to refactor. This will be another conversation for sure, but I rarely refactor code just for the sake of refactoring. If code's really fucked up, I'm just gonna like get my ticket in, get mine, get out. And I think that that's what most people should be doing, but different topic for a different day. So let's say your QA person like says, okay, this is good to go. Then your code gets merged in, and then you go to the release process, which is like different for every company, and probably the scariest part of like, for me, the scariest part of software development is releases for sure, because that's where like the rubber meets the road and shit can get fucked, and you can look like a real fucking idiot. And it's always like, release issues so common. Like, every company I've worked for has had a very complicated release, like system of release, like release procedure, and it's just that's like it's just tough. Like it's just like scary. Like I've pushed bugs to prod, and it just feels shitty. But yeah, your first day, you'll be in that meeting. You'll meet your team. You'll get introduced. They'll probably get you on the Jira. You might even get. Every job that I've worked, I've gotten a ticket on my first day. So you'll start working and writing code on your first day, probably. You may need some help. I'll throw this in the mix. Just getting like apps up and running is a fucking whole thing for most places. Like it's there's always like snags. It's not just like yarn install, yarn start, or npm install, npm start, or whatever. There's like very often other weird, funky pieces that need to be like handled first. And God, I remember going for holy shit. I'll never forget this. So I've been working on my own apps for the 5 or 6 months period prior, and when you do like a Create React app, or you're just like doing some like general development, generally speaking, like everything works very smoothly for the most part. You can have like Webpack issues and all this other fucked up shit, but like if you're going off of I'll just talk about Create React app. If you're going off that, the setup is fucking incredible. You start your app, and then it does like the hot module replacement stuff. So if you like change something, if you change some code and save it, it'll automatically like rebuild, and it'll build in like half a second, and then your app has changes, and you're looking at it in the browser. No big deal. Okay, that's great for small apps, and for like Create React app, which like has a very well thought out sort of system of build, a really like well done build system. Your company may not have a good build system. So I remember the first thing I pulled down, I talked about this last stream. It was this project called Web Demo, and it took 5 minutes to start the app, and then anytime you made a change, it took 5 minutes for it to recompile. So think about this. If you're like, let's say you're making like a style change or something, anytime that you go to like margin left 5 pixels, save, you have to wait fucking 5 minutes for the app to like finish, rebuilding and everything. So that's when I learned to like get very into doing everything in Chrome first, doing everything through like getting my code right in Chrome, and then updating the code and saving it. That totally affected how I wrote code. Like it completely changed how I had to write code. Probably made me a better dev overall, maybe, but infuriating. And most of the apps were like that, where it took a long time for things to rebuild, partly because the laptop sucked, which is interesting, or tests to run. Tests took forever to run. Oy. Man, get my coffee. Coffee's hitting me hard right now. This burrito is good. But yeah, I do remember. Yeah, that was a wake up call, or like a reality biting me. Like it was so hard for me to adjust to how long those apps took to build. It's really fucking shitty. But if you're not doing that, so that was my first job where they had that. They're back, and they did their front end system. The way they develop, I don't know if I even talk about this legally, but the way they developed their front end apps was they basically had like just mock data. They're working on front end apps, and there is no back end. Basically, you're working without the back end, and you're making your own mock data and hoping that lines up. Not a great way to develop. My second job, they used Docker. They Dockerized the entire app, so you can have the actual app running on your computer. It's fucking awesome. That is the shit. That's the ideal way to develop it. It's like, it's you want your development environment to be as close to your production environment as possible, so that you don't have these funky release issues and shit, or issues later. But the problem with that is that now, if you have to know Docker, because shit would fucking blow up all the time. Anytime you like every other week or so or 2 weeks or so, if you start the app, something's going on, and that's a little front end boy when my Rails app is blowing up because of something weird in SQL or some shit, or like not even that. Like you get all kinds of weird issues, and you just kind of learn how to like restart and like pull everything down again, and maybe reinstall this, and maybe do this, maybe do that. You like almost like a car mechanic, you learn like a sequence of things to do. But I don't think I understood any of that shit really. I understand it at like a fundamental level, but the point is that took a while. So that took like a couple hours just to get the app running on Docker. So my first day was like doing a whole lot of that, and then their whole product is complicated shit. So it's also like, good lord, SSL certs became like something that is not really a thing that I had to encounter or like deal with before. SSL certs became a whole fucking thing. HTTPS and all that shit really mattered because it's a payment company. And I don't know if you don't know this, but like, I don't think you can, or you can't, like you really can't. You can't accept payment for a credit card over HTTP. It has to be over HTTPS, which is like I didn't even know the fucking difference between those two things was. I'm still learning, you know. But yeah, the first day is going to be a whole lot of that shit, of like setting stuff up. Shit, this is broken. Please, can you help me? Get your ID badge and shit. But I would say we got about 20 minutes left. I've been rambling. Good lord, I'm rambling today. I would say if I was to give myself advice for my first day, definitely like relax. I wasn't too like tense or anything, but like even more, you could chill out, have fun, and meet the people. Like I think if there's one thing you could do, it's just like be yourself, be social, and like make it clear that you're at that company to grow yourself and to like you're there because you want to be there. You're there to work and do cool shit and like grow as a person and grow as a company and all that stuff. Be that as a junior developer. Like I'll say this: after like 6 months of being at this company, of the team of 25 developers, I was probably top 7 or top 6 developers on the team. With having no experience, and this is with competing with people who had been in software for 5 to 10 years. By the end of my job, like 1 year in, with 1 year experience, the back-end engineers and teams were telling me that I was the best front-end engineer that they had ever worked with. I'd only been working for a year, and like the other developers had been there for 5+ years. So I think that you can get really good really quickly at this shit. I think one really good note I would give is to always be collaborative and never be like a negative person, unless like if you have a real bomb to drop, you could drop a bomb, but it has to come from a place of collaboration. One of the best engineers I've ever worked with was at this company, and he was smart as fuck. This guy was so fucking smart just as a human, and I would say he was also a great technical engineer. Very, very smart. Multiple languages, been writing code his whole life. His dad was like a Hewlett-Packard guy. By the way, there is definitely like you can be born into tech. It's another thing I want to talk about at some point. I didn't realize this was a thing until my last job, but like tech is like that's something that gets passed down from like parent to kid now. And you see the best engineers that I know, honestly, their parents were developers. Which is interesting. And they were taught like when they were in middle and high school, and they have an understanding that like I'll never have. But this guy was one of them. But in terms of like great engineer, in terms of like delivering value to a company, fucking awful. He was the most toxic person I'd ever met. In every meeting, he's just bitching about like, and he wasn't wrong about his complaints. The problem is he's not coming from a collaborative perspective. So every meeting, he would like talk shit about the back end team is they keep changing the data contract, which is like the API, like the like sort of the shape of what like the data is going to look like from an API. It's like, oh, they're changing this shit all the time. They're supposed to have this here last week, but they never do. This is broken. This company sucks. He talks shit about the other front end developers too. so smart, but like that shit is not worth it. And I think like a company like that would much rather have somebody who is. I mean, he's also super productive. So like the one thing you can't say is that like in spite of everything, he crushed work too. When I left, my manager told me that he was the most productive contractor that they'd ever had, which hit me because I thought that was me, but I think that he was right. And I think that like when you're first starting out, or if you're not that, like or not that, I think like somebody who is positive and is collaborative can bring more value to a team, even if they're much less technically inclined, just by bringing like a positive attitude in every day. It's like any other job. Like you want to go in, be positive, understand that you're going to make mistakes, understand that other people will too. One thing with QA I would say is don't get into the game of like this is the blame game is very pervasive and really common. Like a QA person might come back to you and say, hey, I saw that this is broken. Can we get on a call and look? We'll get on a call and I'll be like, oh, you have this like, this is just a contrived example. You have this like Chrome extension that's really weird and fucking shit up. Can you deactivate that and see what happens? Oh, that fixes the issue. And then she'll, she or he might say like, oh, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. This person told me to install it, and like they're already trying to shift the blame, and then that will like keep being a thing, where like everyone's saying like now as an engineer, you might be going into something, like you might be called in by QA again for a different issue, and you'll say like, oh, that's not what it says in the ticket. I was doing this, blah blah blah. Don't do that shit. Like don't just make excuses for something, or even if it's a good excuse, and don't be like blame gaming. Just get shit done, because who gives a fuck about that? Nobody, like, that's almost more for your own ego to make yourself feel better, but it serves nobody. It doesn't make the other person, it's not like the other person is like, oh, I knew he was great. I knew it wasn't him. He's so goddamn good at it. Like, that's not, don't be like that. Just be very collaborative. The other thing I would say, oh, this is huge for front end, for if you're, first time developer, you're just starting a job, or, or even if you're not, even if you have a couple years experience, don't panic. Like, the one really good piece of advice I could offer, I think, is don't panic. When you go to meetings and stuff, people are going to be panicking about all kinds of stuff a lot. People take the stuff very, very seriously, and like, even if it's like a very little thing, people are going to like panic and like freak out. And you want to be like the calm person in the room who's like, hey, this isn't that big of a thing. Like, the end users are not really affected by what we're talking about, whatever it might be. If they are, then it's a prod issue, and then you got to like get on your shit, but you don't want to panic through it. I think my younger career, when I was like, first starting out, if I had like I said, if I pushed even to QA, like if I pushed a bug to QA, I might panic. Or if I got a bunch of shit on my pull request, I might panic. Or if I pushed something out to pre-prod or prod that was fucked up, I would panic. I would just panic a lot, and it's not helpful. And I think it's also like a sign of an unseasoned developer. I'll tell you that there are times to panic. Like, depends on the company you're working for. If you're working for like my last job was a payments related company that did software as a service for handling subscription payments, and I worked on their JavaScript SDK. And if we fucked up, if we pushed a bug to prod, then all of our customers, they couldn't accept like intake for payment. And we're talking about like big ass companies who like companies like Twitch, or like big companies who are now like, we literally can't take on new customers. We haven't been able to for like X period of time because Dave fucking has a typo in his variable, and like or some dumb shit like that. That's when that's like a time to panic, because then you're like violating software licensing agreements and shit's real fucked. That's a little different. But even then, man, my last job was a fucking eye opener. Because the company is that, like, my company now, my first company, we just built web apps, like proprietary websites for people to sign up and like manage their 401k and like sign up for insurance and go through report an injury from their workman's compensation insurance. So there's just websites like that. My second job, the last one, was a very different beast. Because it's a SaaS company, so other companies are using what you're making, and like there's agreements and expectations based on that, and the API, like the product is also terribly complex. So shit broke pretty frequently, and when it did, that meant like all these companies can't do this, or like is big issues that have to get fixed. So what would happen is you'd go into like big Google chat room or big Google Hangout, and you'd have like all like possibly bunch of bigwigs in the company, and all like the all-star stud developers trying to figure out what's going on with this thing, and trying to solve it in a timely manner, because like water is like leaking and shit. Once I saw that a couple times, that made me so much more chill for all the other shit, because that's like, you're seeing like those. Firstly, it's really fucking cool to see. It's like it's like the Top Gun of software development. Like everyone's on the fucking thing and like trying to solve this problem super fast, and it's pretty fucking cool in some way, but it's intense. And I'm talking about like damn good engineers who are at this company doing this. It was fucking really cool to see. But since I saw that, and since I've been a part of that, where I was like really really panicking, I don't really panic as much anymore. I'm generally pretty calm, and I think that really serves like the team that you're working for. You always want to just like stay calm, chill, like, hey, yeah, we get it. Not blasé and like don't give a fuck about anything, but like not getting too up, not getting too down. Understanding that you're gonna fuck up, other people are gonna fuck up. It's not the end of the world. Generally speaking, depending on what your product is, it's probably not the end of the world. And like, I think also imposter syndrome is so fucking common. So it's very likely that you'll feel, even in like your first 2 or 3 years, you might feel like you're going to get fired, or like the other engineers are much better than you, or any number of things. And I would say I don't feel that. I felt it a bit at my last job, but then I would later find, after they released the salaries of everybody, like I was comparing myself to people who I shouldn't have been comparing myself to, and you might be doing the same thing. So just don't really compare yourself to other people too much. Handle your shit. I guess the other one is like when to ask for help. That seems to be a pretty common question, and I will rarely ask for help for anything I'm doing. It's probably more of a problem than anything else, but if you have to constantly ask somebody for help for doing something, you are not providing value. You're like fucking up. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't ask for help. You absolutely should. But when you ask for help for something, have a very clear set of questions. Like, make it clear that you've poked through the issue as much as you possibly can. Like if your question is, I don't even know how to start this, I don't know what the fuck you're doing. If your question is like, hey, I got this far on this thing, I noticed, but this is still not working. I noticed that, blah, 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 and I'm wondering if blah, blah, blah. Like, that's how you want to kind of frame your shit. You want to be like, have an idea of where you're going and stuff, or what the issue is, and make it seem like you actually tried. A lot of the time, the people that, like, if it's a technical thing and you're just asking a senior engineer for help, they don't know that much more than you do. They're just going to be more persistent, and like maybe they have some tools, like they're better at debug. They just know how to use a debugger better or some shit, or just have you get an intuition after a while for things too. But generally speaking, if you're new, I rarely ask for help, and when I did, I was very lucky too. My first job, I worked with a guy who was like the head of a team, like the head engineer of the team, who was like one of the most patient people I've ever met. Incredibly smart, so fucking smart. Loved coding and loved talking about it. And he was like, I think for me coming in too, He was just excited that there was somebody else excited to code, because so many of these people were like they were like, they didn't have the excitement to do it. It's very much so a job for them, where they just like went in, did it, went home, and weren't really into it. But I was like all about this shit, even though it was dumb. Like I remember asking all kinds. I remember my first day or my second day, I asked. I didn't realize you could dot chain stuff in JavaScript, and I saw that for the first time. I was like, wait, you can do that? And that's like a very basic thing that anyone should know. I also remember it was probably my second month in, and team was like, we were originally using Backbone, and we were moving to React, and I knew React, and like that was one of the reasons they hired me. And we had this meeting, this like cross-team meeting, with another front-end team and another part of the org, to build like a component library for Principal. And I went with the manager of my team, and we met. Like he invited me, and we went with a bunch of people, and we were like, just in a room talking about. Firstly, I thought we were going to talk about like writing code and that kind of stuff. Not true at all. We sat there, like they talked about, where does this thing going to live? Who owns this? The process side, which again, when you first start out, you don't even realize that exists. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, that's what we're talking about? Dumb. Like, I wanted to write code, but that's the shit that really matters. Like that process stuff is what like the like line-to-line code stuff is very fucking like small-minded. Like it's important and it needs to be done, but it's not like a game-changing type thing. But this other stuff, like who owns this? How do we make decisions about this? How are we reversioning this thing? Those are like the real questions. I just didn't know it at the time. And then we had a second meeting for this thing, and we were actually starting to write like code for it. And there was about 10 or 12 people in there, me and my manager, who liked me at the time. And I had, for whatever reason, like the library kind of existed. Someone scaffolded out something, but nobody else could pull it down and run it except for me. So I was like, I volunteered myself to get in front and like drive, which is like the term for if you're pair programming with another person, or if you're like with a group of people, whoever's like actually typing and like, on the computer is like driving. So I'm driving during this thing. The problem is I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like, I went pretty, even now I'm talking about how confident I am with like JavaScript, but I don't know shit. And I remember like, they were talking about prop types in React. I'm like, what the fuck is a prop type? And they're like, and I was just like, my face got really red as they're telling me to type things out and like add this thing or do this, and I didn't really understand what they were trying to say. At some point, they told me to use the .sum method, the array method .sum, and I thought I'd never used .sum. So I put .sum, and I was like, this is a thing? And like, no, dude, it's SOME, like .sum. I remember leaving that crushed. I remember coming home that day and be like, holy fuck, like I am going to get fired. Being really, really embarrassed about it. And which is really silly looking back. Like that was it was so motivating. I learned a ton in the meeting. Like I learned about prop types, and I learned about like this new array method and shit. Like it was, from that outside, it was like such a productive learning meeting. But I was like crushed by it. And I remember it motivated me to go home and like learn more. And I was like reading about prop types that night. Like, what the fuck is this shit? And it's about 5 months later, 6 months later, when I started to get more comfortable, we had another meeting with this group of people. And this time there were about 20 people there. And most of them were online. It was like, there was a room booked, and I was like the only person in the room. Everyone else was away. And because my manager couldn't be there, I was asked to lead the meeting. So at that point, I'm like trying to lead this meeting. We're talking about changing the library to TypeScript, and like it was such a different vibe. Like I was so much more confident, and yeah, I remember walking away from that like, damn, I look pretty fucking good just talking about the benefits of TypeScript for this thing or whatever the fuck it was. But I think it's pretty amazing how much progress you can make in like 6 months, just by sticking with this shit. But yeah, your first day, you're gonna fuck up. You're gonna embarrass yourself. You're gonna have those moments where like you say something fucking dumb, and like you'll be at home being like, oh, why did I say that? You'll have like, you'll have those moments in pull review or in code review where you feel like an idiot, or you're gonna feel dumb an awful lot. You're gonna feel like an imposter quite a bit. You might feel like you don't belong to some extent at certain points, but all that shit's in your head. I think just taking like a chill approach to this stuff and like, you're still working, you're still continuing to do the shit you're doing and like, making your own progress and completing tickets and stuff. As long as you're doing that, you're gold, man. I think that man, the time is almost up here, but I could keep rambling for a while. I think that people get in their head that like certain engineers are better than what they are, or that they're not good enough, and like the bar is lower than you think. That's what I'm trying to say. Most like you do not have to be a god level programmer to get a job, or to be effective, or to add value. Like you can be not that great at programming, not that great at coding, be an engineer, and still find ways to add so much value to a company. There's more to it than writing code, I think, is all I'm trying to say. And even if you're feeling like that might not be, like, if you're feeling like an imposter, you can't write, you don't understand code on a certain level, or like all the other engineers are better than you, just be like, there's so many other things you could be doing, and that stuff will come in time. I remember, I'm gonna extend this another 15 minutes because I want to keep talking. One of the other things you'll find at every company is that like you'll go in, I'll just talk about it from front end, but it's true for back end or for anything. You'll go in and there will be like a couple or probably a couple like standout studs. There's always like the couple engineers who are fucking like top dog shit. You'll look at them and like you'd be like, fuck, this person is so much smarter than me, so much better at code than me. Like I will never, you'll think you'll never get there and shit. And this is true of every company you go to. They'll have these people, and these are people. The people I'm talking about are people who have been at those companies for like 5+ years or 10+ years. And what you find is the reason they know everything isn't because they're like godly smart, although they might be. Some of the people are very smart, but it's because they wrote the shit. Like, of course they're gonna know all the ins and outs of this thing. It's not because they're just like fucking Neo in the Matrix. It's because they actually like wrote this thing. So of course they know all like they were there for it when it was written or something. Like, of course they're gonna know all the ins and outs of this stuff. Of course they're gonna know more than you. So you can't really compare yourself to someone like that. I remember one day, someone I was working with asked me for help with something, and he had an issue where it's just like a basic web page or whatever, and if you clicked a button, like half of the page would just disappear, which is very fucking weird in front end. Like what the fuck could possibly be happening? Like shit was just like weird shit was happening. It's the kind of bug that's like there's no error on the screen. So now you have to figure out like what the fuck is actually happening. Those are like it can be really tough to figure out if there's not like an error. In which case, like in this case, there's no error. It's just weird behavior. So I'm with him, another developer who he's pairing with, and it's the three of us, and then we grab another developer. So there's four of us looking. We're at a mob programming stage. There's big TV screen, big monitor, and we're like looking at this like, what the fuck could this possibly be? We're going through like, we're going through debugging steps, and we're saying, maybe try this, try that, log this, log that. Let's look at the source code for this library that we're using. We're looking at it for about 30-40 minutes, and we're fucking stumped. And the guy, I mentioned this guy a couple times, but not by name, but the person at this company is my first company who was like my manager, supervisor, head of the team, engineer guy. We asked him for help. We're like, Eric, what the fuck is going on? So he looks, I'll never forget this. He comes over. We've been sitting there for like 30-40 minutes, like struggling. He looks, he goes, okay, open that file. Yeah. Add a key, like a React key, like add a key right there. Okay, refresh. Problem solved. Like 20 seconds. He saw the issue, knew immediately that there was like a missing key in like this iterative rendering scheme, and that was the issue. I'll never forget it. And I was like floored in the moment. Like I was like, dude, how the fuck are you that fucking smart? Like, how do you know that? The reason he's that smart isn't because he's like a genius, although he is very smart. The reason is because he's seen that issue before. It's because he wrote the framework for the library we're using to do the rendering. So he knows the ins and outs of it. He knows how and why it can fuck up. And at the time, I didn't realize it. I thought that he was just like better than us. And to some extent, he's very, he probably is a better engineer. But the reason he was able to do that so quickly isn't because he's like a fucking legend. It's just because he wrote the thing. I remember thinking like that was a big. And then at my last company, there was a guy who is also a fucking phenomenal engineer, probably the best engineer I've ever worked with. And I was blown away by how much he knows about stuff. But it's the same thing. Like I talked to him about it, and it's because he's been doing it for so long. Like he would tell me this. He's like, the only reason I know, like we would be sitting down, and he'd like leave a comment and pull request of mine that was like, oh shit, thank you for saving me from like from shooting myself in the foot like 3 months from now and ending with a weird bug. He'd save me from that like constantly. And I'm like asking him like, how do you know, like how are you so good at this stuff? He's like, dude, I've made all the mistakes that you're almost like all these things that you're doing right now where you're fucking up and I'm just like kind of saving you from. I made those mistakes. Like that's how these people get good, because they fuck up. They had actual experience doing it, and they fucked up. And you sort of get like, over time, you get a really good intuition about what's happening, and you get kind of like, now I feel like when I see a bug on a website, I can, without even knowing too much, like I could kind of figure out, I can make some pretty good theories at least for where to start and where to tug on some string. And that also came from my last job. Had a bunch of that. People would come. We'll save that conversation for another day. Man, this was like a ramble for about an hour. I think this was too much of a ramble. Too much coffee. I think that for the next conversation, we'll probably reel it back in a little bit and have. This is good. It's a good learning lesson. But for Monday, we'll have the new microphone. And I think for Monday, based on the fact that this was rambling, and I didn't even really get to talk about some of the stuff I did want to talk about, I'm going to go with an outline, which I did for the last 2 streams. I didn't have an outline this time. I didn't really have time. But we'll have an outline for the next one. Either way, happy with how this came out. I hope it did record. But it looks like it's live and shit. Feels pretty good. Cool. But yeah, I'm going to sign off. This was another really good one. I feel really fucking good about these streams. And next week we'll have the new microphone, and we'll start building out that platform. I might start doing Tuesdays and Thursday streams too, because this shit is fucking dope. It has been like super fun. But I'll go back and watch this one. We'll see how it all turned out. But otherwise, if anyone's watching, have a great day. Feel free to. I'm not going to say like, comment, and subscribe. I refuse to say that. Anyway, I'll see you.